Jewish American immigrants, particularly from Eastern European countries, were an important part of the patchwork culture that is the makeup of the American identity. These people were coming from nations like the Russian Empire and Poland and left to escape poverty and persecution. They came to America for religious freedom, economic opportunity, and a better life. Jewish immigrants performed a varied amount of jobs to earn themselves and their families a living. Work was tough, but they scrapped by.
In terms of occupations, one of the interesting phenomena, and people have different jobs, but Jews by and large, in terms of the Jewish immigrants, play a disproportionately large role in the garment industry. So a lot of the immigrants come over with skills in the needle trades, in clothes making, and the estimate is that by the beginning of the 20th century, about 75% of the people working in the garment business in New York are Jewish. And this is a factor of timing. This is a burgeoning business that's growing in New York at this time. It becomes the clothing capital of the world, and so these immigrants, many of them who do have skills, either working with sewing machines, working with needles, working in tailoring, find their way into this occupation, both men and women. And so you have people who are cloak makers, they make coats, they make undergarments, they make blouses, they make vests, all sorts of things in these shops. They work often in areas that are called sweatshops. A sweatshop doesn't necessarily mean that it's somewhere that's hot and that they're sort of working in difficult conditions like that. The conditions are very difficult, but what that means is that the labor is sweated out of the laborers in a sense that they are only paid based on the number of pieces, the number of garments that they produce. So they have to produce 100 cloaks, 500 cloaks, and when they do that, they're then paid for their work. And people are paid extremely, extremely low rates. So there's high levels of poverty among the workers. So on the Lower East Side, in particular, you have to imagine this scene, which doesn't exist anymore, but in terms of the Jewish Lower East Side, this is the largest Jewish city in the world, right? In terms of urban population, the fact that you have millions of Jews who come, in particular from Eastern Europe, but other parts of Europe, to New York City, and specifically the Lower East Side, you have this burgeoning street scene of people who are hawking their wares, right, trying to sell things. And yes, people have these push carts where they might be selling food, they might be selling other items that they've produced. One of the most popular businesses for Jewish immigrants in the generation before the large-scale Eastern European immigration is as peddlers. People will take their wares from place to place, from town to town in the United States and try to sell things. On the Lower East Side, there were so many people in such a dense area that the streets become these sort of vast open-air markets where people can sell things on the streets. And frankly, child labor is quite common. In theory, children should be in school in the mornings during the day, but if the family needs them to, they'll keep them out of school and put them to work against sort of child labor laws. So it's a very difficult life. Families don't have much time for leisure time activities. People might end up working 7 days a week, just to make ends meet. So the children very much desire to get out of that neighborhood, go to school, get an education, and get a job that won't require them to stay there.
The Jewish immigrants lived primarily in a particular section of New York City after they had arrived in the country. The housing was not in good condition, and life was hard.
Housing was difficult. People end up living in these hastily thrown together apartment buildings that are called tenement buildings. And the way that the tenements are structured, they are not very well constructed. They are very prone to fires, very prone to other types of hazards. You have large-scale overcrowding, many families being forced to live either in what would be the equivalent of one apartment is broken up into multiple apartments. Some families living in single rooms within those apartments. In terms of plumbing, there could be one bathroom per floor. So you have many different families using this one bathroom on each floor. The tenements don't have good air circulation.
Despite working long hours and weeks, the immigrants found ways to entertain themselves, to have fun, and to relax from their difficult lives.
In terms of entertainment on the Lower East Side, despite the fact that people are very busy with their work lives and the difficulty of the poverty, and they do manage to scrounge together to have enough to have some entertainment. And what we see developing on the Lower East Side, very active Yiddish theater, Yiddish cultural life. So, for example, on 2nd Avenue, the Yiddish theater really begins to develop. There are also small movie houses that begin to develop, Nickelodeons that are places that you can spend a nickel and be able to see some entertainment begin to develop. Immigrants play a leading role in developing motion picture industry. And then, people also like to go, if they can, to Coney Island, where they can enjoy some of the entertainments, go to the beach in Brooklyn, and get out of the swelter of the city, if possible. And then kids, will make entertainment in the street and play games and sports in the street.
Jewish Americans have played an important part in American history and culture. Like other groups before them and even after them, the Jews had tough lives and worked hard to better themselves.